Your views, first of all, on these proposed plans to the public order bill?
Good morning. Yes, nice to be with you this morning from Stalybridge. So we've had an announcement of this overnight. We'll obviously have to see exactly what it is the government are proposing. But my first reaction is to say, of course, people need to be able to get on and live their lives, do what they need to do alongside protests that are taking place. But the police do already have quite extensive powers around that. And most of the time that the problems, frustrations people feel are when the police don't have the capacity, don't have the resources to do that. So I would like to hear a little bit from government about how they're going to do this alongside the big reductions in police numbers we've seen over the last 13 years. And, you know, in terms of what we've heard that it might be preempting protest, I mean, that doesn't sound particularly British to me. Of course, people have the right to protest alongside striking the right balance in not disrupting other people's lives too much. So I worry, I'm afraid, it's just a press release rather than anything substantive from the government this morning.
What is announced and how that goes as it goes through Parliament. Can I turn your attention to the front of the Mail this morning? And this follows on from some of the things that your leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said during a big round of interviews yesterday, when he was talking about this idea of sort of avoiding going to your GP and going straight to specialists as a sort of reform into the NHS. Well, this is being described as dangerous by critics this morning and a worrying reliance on things like Dr. Google. Has he thought this through?
Well, yes, we have. Well, first of all, we are consulting on a 10-year plan to reform the NHS. The truth is, after 13 years of the other side being in power, things are very, very tough in the NHS, and there isn't a huge amount of money around to simply say, just spend more money on things. The economy we've got isn't the kind of economy that's going to produce the revenues to do that. So we've got to at least think about doing things differently. And when we talk about the specific issue of going straight for specialist care, this wouldn't be for everything. This wouldn't be completely removing GPs from the system. It already does exist in a number of areas for a few treatments, and looking at greater ways to do that, but most of all being willing to think about doing things in a different way within a publicly funded, publicly provided National Health Service, I do think is necessary, because at the minute, the kind of experience people are having when they're trying to access care, it is simply not good enough. And I often think when politicians or anyone proposes thinking of new ways of doing things, it does get sometimes a negative reaction. Even the creation of the NHS in 1948 got a similar reaction initially. But I think we're right to think about not just how we can try and get more capacity, more resources into the NHS, but how can it work better for everybody? And we've got to be willing to have those conversations.
It's honest, you know, you're admitting there that you could well be on a collision course with medics in all of this, because a lot of people will say, you know, a Labour government, you're going to be having big fights with the BMA. They're opposed to this suggestion. Wes Streeting also saying he wants to end GPs' independence and get them on NHS contracts, and that's not going to go down well with the BMA.
Well, look, it's not about trying to pick a fight with anybody. It's simply the case that we have to look at how we can have a national health service that really works for the kind of health conditions, the kind of society we have today, and we've got to be willing and able to put forward new ideas around that. I mean, sometimes even I think the proposal we put forward where obviously we would double the number of doctors being trained in the NHS, that actually got a negative reaction at first when we put it forward. So look, there'll sometimes be that. We're more than willing to have the conversation about what we're trying to do, which is a modern health service, still a national health service in public hands, delivered for the public's benefit. But in the past, we've seen reforms have a substantial improvement in how the health service works, and I think we've got to be willing to have that conversation. And it's certainly not about picking a fight for the sake of it, but we've got to be willing and able to put forward those ideas, because otherwise what happens is public satisfaction with the NHS will decline, people will look elsewhere to get the healthcare they need, and that wouldn't be in anybody's interest. So we're going to put forward plans that will really make the National Health Service work for people today.